My name's Russell Spatz. I'm an alcoholic. And I haven't felt necessary to take a drink since, nor have I. You have to say that, you know. You got to say, I haven't found necessary, nor have I, because there was one guy in Texas. He said, I haven't found necessary to take a drink in 20 years. And his buddy was sitting in the front row. He says, you were drunk last night? He says, yeah, but it wasn't necessary. You got to watch these alkies. They're really not that well, you know. But they have issues. Alcoholics have issues. Did you guys know that? You know, they say in the appendix 2, they talk about when you ultimately, 20 or 30 years down the road, right before you die of cancer, discover that there is a God. And you get on your knees and you get serious about this thing. Dark night of the soul kind of stuff. Some people do that beforehand. They actually get serious. They get serious about the sixth step. They decide their entire life is about repeatedly doing whatever they can to grow in the image and likeness of God. They didn't even stop saying HP. They just say God like straight out, not worrying what people think about him. I mean, I've heard that happen sometimes to some people. So I haven't found it necessary to have a drink since, nor have I had a drink since January 25th. It's dementia. It's just driving me crazy. It's a short drive, though. I haven't found it necessary to take a drink, nor have I taken a drink since January 25th, 1981. So, I'm in my 45th year of sobriety. If I make it another month, you know, I don't know, you know. And so you learn a lot of you get a new perspective. I can attest to this. I can attest this as a matter of personal knowledge, not just reading the book. You know, one way you can have, they say in Appendix 2, we find out about this stuff. Some of us have like flashes, you know, epiphanies, and I've had that. I really have. But for many of us, it's like we get stuff from what's called the educational variety. You guys ever, the education? You know, maybe I'm going to tell you a little bit about the kind of education you're going to get in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been educated. For 45 years, I've been educated. I've been educated by repeated humiliations, crushing of my self-sufficiency, sober. As a matter of fact, there's nothing like being crushed, sober. It's nothing like picking up a 20-year medallion and then getting crushed. You know what I mean? You could be surprised how much you could learn. You know, Bill Wilson I think he wrote the 12 of 12 when he had like 13 or 14 years or something like that. And they had a big meeting of the Alkies, big Alkie meeting. And that's when he came down with they all decided it was like a business meeting. And he had the most time. And I think, you know, give or take, don't hold me this thing, he had about 15 years. You guys ever been to a business meeting?
Yeah.
You know, I went to some. You know, I really did go to some. And I even go to some now, you know, but it's the people seem a little more mature because I hang around people that are like that these days. But I used to go to business meetings and I said, I got a lot of education about insanity at business meetings. So you get a lot of education about insanity, just living your life, having a good sponsor that main desire in life is to drive you to drink and doesn't like you much anymore anyway. They tell you things like, you know, good sponsors will tell you like the truth, the unvarnished truth. You know, they're very cruel. And they abuse you. You're like, I had an abusive sponsor. And, you know, children of abusive parents, they become abusers. Did you know that? So I relish in the fact that I'm pretty obnoxious. I have a guy sponsor, he's got 20 years, and he told me this story. that his wife went to a psychiatrist after he got sober for about a year or something. And he says, and he went to a psychiatrist and he says, my husband doesn't drink anymore. And the psychiatrist told his wife, he says, well, that's wonderful. What happened? He says, he went to AA. He says, well, that's incredible. And she says, well, he must have a sponsor. And what he said is she told the psychiatrist, is, yes, he has a sponsor and he's obnoxious. And the psychiatrist told her, some people need obnoxious. Some people need obnoxious. Did you know that? It's true. Some people need a cruel, obnoxious sponsor who seemingly doesn't care whether they drink again. Really, why don't you just leave and drink? Get out of here, doesn't care. They do care. They care so much. The truth is, the guy who tells you that kind of stuff cares so much that he doesn't give a shit what you think about him. He doesn't think in terms of, well, I better not tell him this because he won't like me. They don't think about themselves. They say, what does this guy need? He needs a kick in the ass because he's an arrogant, defiant. Our chief characteristic is defiance, which is a form of insanity. So in any event, so you learn a lot about insanity just sitting in an AA room. You don't think you're insane, maybe, you might not think you're not that bad, but, the way you learn it, we don't even know our story. We come in here, we don't have a story, and bad breaks and misunderstandings, but then you'll hear some guy or some gal say a story. And so you say to yourself, you can't confront an alcoholic because they're all filled with defenses. They have their defenses up. Like, for instance, I remember that there was a time, and I've actually had it happen to me lately, where not only I would say, but I would have people say to me, you don't understand. Now, I know you guys are pretty sharp, so you've probably never said that to anybody, but I would have a guy with like 30 years tell me something about myself, and I had like 3 minutes. And after he tells me something about myself, I'd explain to the guy with 30 years that he really didn't understand. You don't know me. You don't understand. And, he actually understood pretty good. I've heard, so you go to a meeting, so you can't confront them because they're well defended. It's like, I said, some guy came to see me in the hospital, and I said, wait a second. I said, I know from where you're sitting, you think I have a drinking problem. But I don't have a drinking problem. I know from where you're sitting, it looks like I have a drinking, but I don't have a drinking problem. He says, I drink because I have problems. As a matter of fact, my drinking perfectly matches my problems. And one day, my problems are going to go away. And I'm not going to have to drink anymore. So I really appreciate your advice. I really do. But why don't you go F yourself, or something like that, that kind of thing, And it's like a form of insanity, that's what it sounds like. You don't understand. Nobody understands. I'm so unique. I once said to my sponsor, I said, I was having a bad minute. When an alcoholic has a bad minute or a bad hour, it doesn't say, they never say, because of the way our brains are. There's a little voice in an alcoholic's brain. Look, I'm just giving you my opinion based upon 45 years of working with alcoholics and working with myself. And my dementia has helped me a great deal. Let me tell you how great dementia is. I've noticed after 45 years of listening to all the bullshit alcoholics saying that our problem has something to do with thinking. Let's get past me for a second. I sponsored hundreds of men. And I've worked with women too. They call me up. I don't sponsor them, but and whenever they call me up on the phone, it says, "You got to listen to me. You wouldn't believe what just happened. Everything they're going at like 78 RPM for you younger people, you don't even know what I'm talking about, but it has to do with records and stuff. But 78, they're going real fast, and they're talking real fast, and they're all over the place, and you can't even stop them. You say, wait, no, you got to hear my story. There's more. It's all about being scared and pissed off, and why is this happening to me? And when they finally get done, they tire themselves out like little children, run around, they get tired. I said, let me ask you something. They said, what? I said, you've been thinking about this a lot, haven't you? He said, yeah, how did you know? I said, I don't know, I just guessing. An educated guess, you know what I mean? You've been thinking about this thing. So I've come to a conclusion that our insanity and our problems have a lot to do with our thinking. And if we could only stop thinking, we'd probably feel better. I had a sponsor who I once explained to him at 10 years sober why I needed to get a divorce. And let me tell you something. It was a long story. It was a detailed story. And I was right. I was so right. And he, after I told him the whole story, in detail, he didn't even stop me. He said, so that's it. And I was pissed. And he says, so, and then he said this, because I always picked sponsors that were stupid. They weren't I have all these degrees. I got a shitload of degrees. I was going for a PhD in algebraic topology. I went to law school. I became division. I was very smart, As a matter of fact, I actually knew everything. But unfortunately, that's all I knew. I didn't know how to hold a marriage together, be a decent human being, but I knew everything else. So I explained to him everything, and I said, so after I was done, I said, I'm getting divorced. So he said, and he said this to me. This is how stupid these people are. He says, he had about 20 years. He says, so why are you upset? I mean, the one thing alcoholics know is you know why you're upset. You'll go to a meeting, you'll tell people why you're upset. You'll go up to somebody on the street and say, let me tell you the story. You'll tell them why they're upset. If there's one thing we are geniuses at as to why we are upset, beyond a reasonable doubt, prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So I'll tell them why I'm upset. And I'll tell you, not only is it clear to me, I can tell you this, if I was in a bar like that, like the Alibi Lounge, and my drinking buddies were there, and I told them what I told him, they would all agree, kick that bitch to the side. You know what I mean? They could understand me. This sponsor was the dumbest sponsor in the world. Yeah. So I told him that story, and he said, so why are you upset? How do you even handle something like that? When you tell somebody a story that it's obvious why you're upset. If you don't understand that, you're so stupid. You're like Alki stupid. You ought to be killed because you're so dumb. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, why are you upset? I said, well, she did. I said, I heard all that. I said, but that's not why you're upset. I said, what about when she said, whatever, and, no, that's not why you're upset. What about, he says, that's not why you're upset. And you ask him 5 or 6 times about different things she said or did. He says, that's not why you're upset. And you're sitting there. And this is your sponsor, it's the only sponsor you have. And he's told you that's not why you're upset. And you got when I did this, I had 10 years. 10 years. Said, that's not why you're upset. I'm not going to tell you the rest of that story because I'm going to go back to when I had 1 year. Okay? This is how brilliant I am and what a slow student I am. When I had 1 year, and my sponsor at that time was sponsoring me and sponsoring another guy named Bobby. Bobby, I'm a white chip wonder. I picked up my white chip, never drank again after that. But Bobby would drink every 30 days. He'd be good for 30 days. Then he'd drink, and he'd wind up in Bark. I think they still have Bark here. And we would go pick Bobby up, me and my sponsor. He'd get him a place to stay. He'd sober him up. get him a job. Bobby was great for exactly like 29 days. And on the 30th day, Bobby would drink. And my sponsor was a great guy. He would take me out. We'd do 12-step. He was out there looking for alkies to help out. We'd drive up to Bark again. We'd pick him up. We'd bring him down. He'd sober him up, get him a job. And Bobby was great for like 29 days. And on the 30th day, he would drink again. And Bobby would tell us, he says, well, he'd tell me, he says, you're just an alcoholic. You don't understand? I'm like a 30-day guy. He says, every 30 days I drink. Or 31 days I drink. I says, you don't have that problem. I have that problem where 30 days I drink. I mean, I don't know how to handle that because he was a different type of alcoholic. You understand? He's not an alcoholic like you guys. He's an alcoholic like every 30. Some alcoholics drink like every 30 days or they sober up. But then I'm an alcoholic like after 5 years I drink again. Then after 2 years I drink again. You know, it's like a different type of alcoholic. You know, it's like more unique. Needs something else, okay? And he would do that like around 3 or 4 times. And we'd go up there and pick him up and everything. And I started feeling bad for my sponsor. My sponsor had like 15, 16, 17 years, a nice guy. And he's going up there all the time and picking him up. And it was obvious to me, being brilliant at that time, at 1 year, that this guy was taking advantage of my sponsor. He was taking advantage of him. He was full of shit. I mean, I know looking at you guys, and, you know, you're obviously very solid. You guys probably have never ran into alcoholics that were full of shit. But I have run into people that tell me they need help, and I find out they don't listen to a word I say. They just want attention, you know, like. But that's what this guy was, and it was pissing me off. And the reason it was pissing me off because this guy was abusing my sponsor. He's running a con job on my sponsor. So we were driving up to Bark, you know, after around 5 months of this bullshit. And I said to my sponsor, I was angry. I was pissed off. I was having an argument. I had a lynch mob in my mind, you know, kill him, you know, because the way I think is, it's not that, what we really need to do is take him out and chop his fucking head off. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the way I just tell you, that's the way I think. I'm sorry to use the F word, but I if I'm going to tell you the truth, I'm saying kill him, burn him at the stake. I'm killing people. I used to do that all the time when I was always killing people. Guy cut in front of me, you know what I mean? I had a machine gun. I'm like, imaginary machine gun. Listen, sober. I'm talking sober. I'm not talking drunk. You cut in front of me, you know, something happened. I'm like pulling the trigger. I'm watching his car explode. I'm going home. I'm killing his wife and baby in front of him. Then I'm resurrecting them. I'm killing them again. You know, you see, you guys are relatively well alcoholics. You're not emotionally disturbed alcoholic. I'm not well. You know, I'm not a well person. Okay. Although I didn't realize that at the time. I was massacring everybody. So in any event, what happened with Bobby, so I'm in the car and I say to my sponsor, we need to turn this car around. He says, why? I said, this guy's full of shit. I tell him, he says, he's full of shit. He doesn't care about you, doesn't care about me, doesn't care about anybody. He's just full. We did this 5 months ago. We did this 4 months ago. We've been doing this crap for 4 months. We've been doing this. He doesn't give a crap. We got to turn this thing around and I'm a lawyer, so I'm like giving him like an opening statement, closing argument, kill his ass, you know, and everything like that. And I was right. And he was my sponsor, nice guy, but he was like a used car salesman. I was so intellectually superior to him. It was unbelievable. I mean, I built an argument that he couldn't argue against because it was so true. You understand? And I mean, you'd have to be an idiot not to believe that I was correct. And he didn't say, so what could he say? And then there was like, he looked at me at one point because I was still going. He would say things, I would stop for, he'd say, are you done? Are you done? Because the lynch mob, I was still burning them at the stake in my mind. You know what I mean? I just couldn't, so angry, and said, are you done? I said, yeah, I'm done. He says, you sure? I said, I'm done. I really wasn't, He said, and then he said, so what could he say? There's nothing this guy could say to counteract my argument. And he said, are you done? I said, yes, I'm done. He said, Russell. I said, what? He said, Russell, listen to me. I said, what? This is what he said to me. He said, it doesn't bother me like it bothers you. And I go, how could that not bother you? Everything bothers me. And I wanted everything he had, and he wanted nothing I had. He used to have what I had. It's called alcoholism. So let's go up 10 years since I'm now cured. Now I'm cured. I've got 10 years sobriety. I'm sponsoring people, and I'm cured of alcoholism. And I tell this story about my wife, and I've got a child with her. We got kids and everything like that. And I'm going to kick her to the curb because of all this stuff, and I'm upset and everything like that. And no, but now you see, I'm upset. You understand what I'm saying? But I've got a 10-year medallion. So it's not like I'm insane or anything. I have a problem. I got a 10-year medallion. And he says to me, why are you upset? And I tell him, I said, I just told you 20 minutes why I'm upset. And he said, that's not why you're upset. Now I obviously have another crazy, dumb sponsor, and I said, that's not why I'm saying. That's not why I'm saying. That's not why I'm saying. Then he shuts up. So I'm sort of thinking, this is what I'm thinking, because he's got like 15, 16, 20 years, whatever he is. I'm thinking that he knows something that I don't know. He's like, he knows what's wrong. And anybody knows anything about alcoholics, the one thing we want to know is we want to know what's wrong with us. That's why we go to psychiatrists. This guy knows something he's not telling me. And I say to him, that's not why I'm upset. Then he shuts up. So then I say, so you know why I'm upset? He says, oh, yeah, I know why I'm upset. You know why I'm upset? So easy. It's clear. I said, you're gonna tell me why I'm upset? He goes, I don't know. Do you really want to know? I says, of course I want to know. Why am I upset? And he says to me, and this is the exact words he says to me, because he loved me so much. He said, listen, stupid. You're upset because you're upsettable. That's what he said to me. What did the first guy say? It doesn't bother me the way it bothers you. I was upset. He wasn't upset. He said, you're upset because you're upsettable. Because you're fucking crazy. Because you're insane. He didn't say that. He said, you're upset because you're upsettable. I said, what is this, like Zen AA? I can tell pretty much what I need to know about a person in AA, or for that matter, any person, but especially a person in AA, about their sobriety and what they say by what it takes to upset them. You could have 40 years. If I'm watching you and you're upset about stupid stuff, if you're upset at all, really, don't take yourself too seriously as like a benchmark with me. People start taking themselves seriously. You can tell me that you're, a super spot. You can tell me everything you want about yourself. If I see you acting out like you got 3 days, I deal with people all the time that got 20 years, 15 years, and they start talking, they sound like they have 3 days. They literally sound like they have 3 days. I can tell they're not sober. So Bill Wilson has this 15-year get-together. That's when they did the traditions. Those things that people use to keep you in an AA box so you can never grow past AA. They just say to you, you're violating the traditions, so don't talk about God. You're violating traditions, don't talk about Jesus. You're violating the traditions, don't quote the Bible. That's all they read in AA the first 4 or 5 years. Where don't what does it say? Rarely ever seen a person fail who was follow. What is it? What's the word?
Thoroughly followed our path.
Thoroughly followed the path. Thank you. And the path was they read the books they found essential were 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, and the book of James. But don't you ever mention that. Yeah, Dr. Bob said, if you want to know about AA, just read the Holy Bible. First things first was seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. All things will be added unto you. But don't you be saying that in AA. Some clown will come up to you and say, you're getting out of the AA casket, the AA box. You know what I mean? It violates the traditions. The Bible is not conference approved. The conference was a business meeting with a guy with the longest time was Bill Wilson. They had that conference. They came down with traditions. I'm not saying the traditions are bad, but I do want to point out to you the guy who was running the meeting started taking LSD about 2 years later. I just want to point that out. I'm just not telling you anything that you won't learn because Bill Wilson talked about it. And a couple of years after that, he went down the tubes. He was going crazy. And he wrote something called The Next Frontier Emotional Sobriety. And he said, my real problem was dependence on people, places, and things. And I put too much dependence on Alcoholics Anonymous. You'll learn a lot, apparently, from 15 years to like 20 years or 20, you learn. Bill Wilson learned a lot. He was so sure, they wrote, and now people sit around and they use those traditions to make sure you don't grow. They just beat you up, with them. And so let me tell you something. Between the years of 15 years and 45 years, you ever seen that farmer's commercial? He says we know a lot because we've seen a lot. You'd be surprised how much. Well, you know how much you learn. If you just have to have just a little time. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Say, hey, listen, have you learned anything since you had one day? Oh yeah, a lot. You realize that going through all the crap we go through, repeated humiliation, watching people in meetings. You sit there and you're relaxed. Nobody's attacking you. You don't have to say you don't understand, and you hear somebody tell their story, and they say some sort of crazy-ass, insane story, you know what I mean? And you say, man, that guy's nuts. And then the next thought is, shit, I was doing that last week. You learn a lot about yourself just listening to stories, and it's crazy. I had a gal call me up one time. I was on Relay for 8 years. On Relay, anybody calls up AA on a Friday night between 8 o'clock at night and 8 o'clock the next morning, they get me for 8 years, which is why nobody came into AA for 8 years. Gal says to me, can I talk to you? He says, what? He says, look, I'm a nurse and I've got a PhD. The smart ones are always very smart. You know what I mean? They want to make sure you know. So I want to make sure you know. He says, and I've got a little daughter, and I've got a PhD in nursing. I didn't even know you get a PhD in nursing, but she's like a doctor of nursing or something. And he says, I got a problem. He says, when? He says, well, I'm being supervised by PRN, which is what happened with nurses when they're, crazy, with the drinking thing. And I'm supervised, that kind of thing. And he says, and the other day I had a drink. I'm real worried because if they find out I have a drink, I'm going to lose my nursing license. They'll take my daughter away from me. All sorts of bad shit. So she says, and she's sober while she's telling me this. She says, I'm scared. I need to know what I have to do so I don't drink, which is legitimate to ask somebody in AA at 1 o'clock in the morning, He says, but, because remember, she has a PhD in nursing. I don't want to hear anything about Alcoholics Anonymous. So I say, well, we got two problems here. She says, what's the two problems? I said, well, you're talking to a guy. I'm like 6 years sober in AA. And the only way I know about staying sober is going to Alcoholics Anonymous. So when you say to me, you want to know how to stay sober, but they don't want to hear anything about AA, that's like a non-starter because I don't know what plan B is. I don't know what the other deal is, you know what I mean? Or else I'd be in it, you know what I mean? I don't know. And then she says, well, what's the other problem? and I say, you called Alcoholics Anonymous. Miss PhD in nursing. Insane. So you got this second step thing. Insane. Insanity. I'm walking along Miami Beach. There's a sign. $10 cruise to the Bahamas. I go in. I say, you got a sign out there, $10 cruise to the Bahamas. He says, yeah. I said, is that legitimate? He says, yeah. I said, you mean I got a cruise to the Bahamas for $10? That's right. It's a cruise to the Bahamas for $10. Absolutely. Is that, listen, you got $10? He says, yeah. He says, give me the 10, you're on the ship. I give him $10. I get whacked upside the head. I wake up. I'm floating in the fucking Gulf Stream. I can't see land anywhere around. Now the sun is going down, so I know east from west and everything. And I'm floating, I guess, in like a westerly direction. You know what I mean? Or an easterly direction towards, I guess, the Bahamas. I look all around. I can't see land anywhere. You understand? I can't even believe what's happening. I'm in this inner tube. You know what I mean? This black inner tube, and I'm just floating there. I see 100 yards ahead of me, another guy in a black inner tube, the same inner tube. You know, has the name of like a cruise ship on it. I don't even know. I can't remember. I start swimming towards that son of a gun. He's there floating, and I'm there floating, and we're both floating to Nassau or something. I don't know what's going on. And so I say to him, I says, this is unbelievable. We're going to die out here. The sun's going down. I don't even know where we are. I don't even know what's happening. And he says, you're telling me. You're telling me. Look at what's going on. Look at you're telling me. And then I said, this isn't a joke. We could actually die out here. We could die. I mean, who knows? I said, hey, he says, fella, listen, you're telling me. Like, I don't know. We float a little bit more, you know. So what are we going to do? The sun's going out. So I turn to the guy and I say, you think they feed us on this cruise? He goes, I don't know. They didn't last year. Didn't last year. Fucking alky insanity, right? So listen, I come in here. Now here's the other thing. I wanted to see. One of the great things about dementia is the main problem. Sometimes I'll say to guys I sponsor, I say, you know what we need to do with you? An alky brain transplant. Because I believe if we were to have an operation and take your brain out, I think you'd be fine. I honestly do. I don't think there'd be any anxiety whatsoever. Maybe replace your brain with the brain of like an orangutan. You know what I mean? Maybe that's the deal with you. You know, so here's the situation. I'm thinking. I know you guys have been sober for a while, right? Have you ever been anxious? You ever been scared? Sober. I mean, I'm talking about going to meetings, doing everything you're supposed to do, sponsoring people. Have you ever been worried about money, property, prestige? You ever been worried about what people might think about you? Have you ever not said something at a meeting because you're worried they'll think you're stupid? Or said something at a meeting and then said, why did I say that? They think I'm stupid. You know, you ever had go through that stuff, you know, where you worry about yourself? You ever get up in the morning and said, you ever think, man, if I only had a girlfriend, or if I only had a new job, or if I was only making more money, or if I only had a car, I'd be okay? You ever tell yourself that you'd be okay if you had something? You ever get that thing? And then like 3 minutes later, now you're worried about losing the thing, or painting the thing, or fixing the thing, or you need another thing or anything like that? You ever say things like, why is this always happening to me? You know, I can't believe this is happening. You ever get upset about stuff or anything? You know, you ever say anything in your mind? You ever tell yourself you don't care what other people think about you, and then you spend that's after you've spent 10 hours worrying about what they think about you, or, you know, that kind of, yeah. You ever have thoughts that are bad thoughts about yourself and other people that you can't seem to stop? You ever say to yourself, I got to stop thinking about this thing. I've been thinking about it for a week. I got to stop. And for a nanosecond, you stop, then you start thinking about it again. You ever have that problem? Sober, you know? You know what? The great thing about dementia is when you basically lose your mind, you got like two neurons working and they're waving goodbye to each other or something like that. And, you know, so you're not thinking, you just sit there and sort of vegetate, you know? Somebody called me up today and said, what are you doing? I said, just vegetating. This guy went up to a meeting. I was doing a meeting at some place. It was a true story, you know. I was sitting there waiting for a meeting to start like this over at, what group was that?
Life is Good in Boca.
Life is Good group. And he said, can I ask you a question? There's like 100 people or something in the audience. I'm starting a meeting. He says, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. He says, you ever meditate? I said, yeah, I meditate. He says, when do you meditate? I said, when I'm not talking to you. You know, people come up to you, he says, can I ask you a question? Sure. He says, what do you think about this? And they'll invite me to think. They'll say, what do you think about this? And I'll say, I don't. I don't accept invitations to think about things. It always leads to trouble. And then even if I told them what I was thinking about that thing, they'd probably start talking to me. Why would I want to talk to them? They're thinking. I'm not. I used to drink so I wouldn't have to think and I could zone out. It's like committing suicide, but you get to wake up in the morning. I used to smoke dope so I wouldn't think. You understand what I'm saying? Why, when I finally got to a place where I've got no brain cells left, why would I accept a fucking invitation to discuss something with anybody? It's like crazy, right? So, you know, I'm sitting there and in this deal, and I'm thinking, one of the things that happens is when you lose the capacity to think about things, like what's going to happen with this or what's going to happen with that, mostly things that are never going to happen. 9 out of 10 of things that you think are going to happen aren't going to happen. The one thing that's going to happen is going to be different than when you think it's going to happen. When you lose the capacity, I think it's possible that the reason that happened to me is because I'm 76 years old. It's a possibility. It's also possible that since I gave my life to the Lord, and I love God, and He's the central fact of my life, and I'm convinced that He lives in my heart and my mind in a way which is miraculous, doing for me what I can't do for myself, that it has something to do with my faith, because the big book said all men of faith have courage, they trust their God, and they never apologize for God. It's possible that maybe if you really work the steps and you get serious about God, maybe that's what happens. You get some sort of spiritual dementia. But I can tell you this: one of the things that happens when you lose a lot of old ideas and you get debrighted, desmarted, you know what I mean, is a lot of shit becomes clearer. I don't know how to explain it to you. It's not because I'm smart. I used to be smart, and I was stupid. I was like smart, stupid. I was smart, but I do and say stupid things. Then I got stupid, and I became smart or wise. And so I would just see things. I'd see things in other people. They would tell me something. I'd see things, and I'd say, I understand your problem. This is your problem. So I tell them what their problem was, and they say, you don't understand. I said, no, actually, I do understand. Because I went through what you're going through. You're the one who doesn't understand. That's why you're asking me the question, you know. But that's like really too, you know, you understand what I'm saying? So I see things now. And you know what I see? Let me tell you what I see. I see that every emotion I have had when I was drinking, the fears, the worries, the anxieties, the envy, the sloth, you know, the false pride, every emotion, bad emotion that screwed me up when I was drinking, I still had it. I still had it after I stopped drinking. There weren't any like new fears, new emotions. Every crap that went through my mind when I was drinking, I still had after I stopped drinking. It's just that I wouldn't drink. And maybe it wouldn't be as bad, or maybe it'd be worse sometimes. There's nothing worse than sober fear, all alone at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I noticed something else. That every emotion I had when I was drinking, bad emotion. Because I sort of think this, you ready for this? This may not be true. I think that most alcoholics want to commit suicide. I think there's a little voice in our brain that says, get me off this fucking planet. I think drinking is a way of temporarily killing ourselves. But we get to wake up. You just whack it down, whack it down, whack it down. And you're like, oh, you're fucking away. You're gone. But you wake up again. See, the problem, my drink was not the drinking. Drunk was okay. I just kept sobering up. My problem was my kidneys and liver kept sobering me up, and I'd wake up and go through the bullshit again. So personally, I think there's a little voice somewhere, I know we think we're great and we're cool, but every once in a while a voice comes through, and you hear it. It says things, you're an asshole, you'll never be okay. Why do you even try? You might as well put a gun in your head and just blow your brains out. Or something like that. I think all alcoholics have it somewhere. It sort of pops out. We text people, we watch TV, we go to baseball games, we get on cruises, we run around, do a lot of stuff to keep the voice down. Worst comes to worst, we drink or we smoke some, but the bottom line is we just want to fucking die. We're not really that much in love with this world and life, you know what I mean? Want to buy something, spend money we don't have, buy shit we don't need, to impress people we don't even like. It's a losing game. That's what I think. And I think that little voice is there. And you know what I think? I think the things of this world, all the crap we're surrounded by, you know, this guy, that gal, this car, that car, the commercials and all that, I think that kind of pours like gasoline on that stuff and magnifies it 100 times. And we can't get out of the world. I think the Lord once said, he said, in this world you'll have problems, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. We can't leave the world, and we can't leave our brain, and we're screwed. I think if we go to a meeting, there's a possibility for 5 or 10 minutes. I mean, it takes us about 10 minutes to get past the bullshit we've been thinking about. And then we finally maybe start listening, and we hear something, we feel a little bit better, like a Band-Aid. You know what I mean? Or for helping somebody else feel better. But then like an hour or two down the road, you know, we're back to craziness again, you know? So it's really just, so, and so I think that's sort of like the way, this sort of insane, crazy thinking linked with this world and everything like that. I think we have it when we're drinking. I think we're having it after we stop drinking. I think we had it when we were 13 years old. I think every bad emotion that we have that's driving us nuts now, we had when we were teenagers or 10 years old. All the fear, all the stuff. It was just like 10-year-old fear. 10-year-old, if I could only have this, I'd be okay. 10-year-old, if only this would change or that would change. Here's what I think. I think the insanity that we suffer from, and quite frankly, I think it's just not alcoholics. I've met a lot of people that suffer from the same insanity, they just don't drink. I feel very sorry for them. They got no meetings to go to. You know what I mean? I think that, I think the insanity we had when we were 5 years old, that we didn't even know we have, because of the way we thought, I think we have them when we're 65 or 70 years old. You know, the truth of the matter is, when I stopped drinking, I was suffering from the same craziness that I suffered from when I was 3 years old or 5 years old, 10 years old. Never sort of went away, you know, that kind of stuff. So, you know, now here's the deal. So I come into AA and I hit bottom, hopefully, on alcohol. Now, here's the interesting thing. It says alcohol is a symptom of a problem. Our real problem centers on our mind, not our body. It tells us you know, it even uses the word. What's the second step here? Does it have the word insane in there? it even uses the word insane. Now, I came to AA when I was 31 years old. I was insane at 3 years old. I was insane at 23 years old. I was insane at 31 years old when I went to AA. You understand? Doing insane things, living a crappy life. So I come into AA, and this is the funny part about insane people. And I'm with a group of people, and they're all insane. And the only reason I like them is because they're insane like me. But I don't even realize I'm insane. I'm just hanging out with people, and they're just as nuts as I am. And some guy gets up and basically tries to explain to us that we're insane. And we can be restored to sanity. Now, let me tell you the insane part. And half the people in the room are, what would be the word? Are upset. They're pissed off because they don't like the word insane. And they're pissed off about being called insane. I mean, there are actually people that get upset about being called insane. And they get upset about that because they're fucking insane. Now, the one good thing about me is when they told me I was insane, I was excited. Because I didn't really know what was wrong with me. So once they called me insane, I wore it as a red badge of courage. I knew I was nuts. I am nuts. You know, every meeting I go to, I'll talk about how crazy I am. I'll give you examples. Machine guns in the car, killing people. It doesn't bother me to be insane. But here's the problem. I just didn't know how to get rid of it. And here's the other problem with alcoholics, with this insanity thing. So I just want to tell you, whether you think you're insane or not, you are. Okay, I'm just going to let you know. You can be pissed at me. It doesn't matter to me. You know, but here's the other problem. What's the second step say? Somebody remind me.
Can you believe that a paragraph or something?
That's the fucking problem. That's the problem. What the hell does that mean? Came to believe. Now, if it said something like, in 30 days, you'll be okay. In 90 days, you'll be okay. In 5 days, you won't be insane. In 20 years, you won't be insane. But who's going to sign a contract saying, I'll go to millions of meetings, I'll do all the shit they tell me to do? How long is that going to take? Oh, you'll come to believe. Well, how long does that take? Is it like a year? I could do this thing for a year. 2 years, 5 years, 7 years. When do you stop being insane? Well, you'll come to believe. I'm not saying you're going to not be insane. I'm saying you will come to believe that God can restore you to sanity. Well, when does that happen? I say, well, the truth is it doesn't actually ever 100% happen. It doesn't 100% happen, you know what I mean? We want your money. I want you to pay the money and go to the meetings and do all that stuff. So I said, so when can you give me an idea? I says, well, you know, some people, they feel a little better at, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. But you never really get there, you know what I mean? And what happens is nobody at a meeting tells you exactly when you're going to get sane. They never do. You see people that are saner than you or seem to be sane, and you say, maybe one day I'll be like that. But the truth is, every one of us, maybe it doesn't matter, 45 years, we still got a little of that insanity in us. You know what I mean? You understand? But it gets bearable. You get used to it. You get bearable. You're not as insane. It's like my sponsor would say, I'm not sinless, but I sin less. So you get better. But then what happens is with alcoholics, it's an unfortunate thing, and it's not our fault. What happens with alcoholics is they actually believe that they're going to reach a point in time where they're sane. They think this, they say, well, if I get 1 year, I'll be sane. If I get 5 years, I'll be sane. And they pick out yourself, well, 10 double digit, I'm absolutely going to be sane. 20 years, I'll be sane. And you see, that's the scary part. That's the death part. You know why they think that? You know why they think that? When it's obviously not true for anybody. Wasn't true for Bill Wilson. He was nuts at 15 years, nuts at 25 years. It's not true for anybody. You want to know why alcoholics want to believe that? Because they're fucking insane. I don't know. Am I making any sense here? Are you laughing? Why are you laughing at me? I'm trying to help you here. I'm trying to help you, you know? But here's the good part. If you realize you're insane, and you know you're insane, and you embrace that insanity, and at the same time, you give your life to God, you will be restored to sanity. But you can't be restored to sanity. The first step in getting out of jail is you got to know you're in jail in the first place. You can't be restored to sanity if you think you're sane. Because then you think you're sane, you don't need God, and then you know what you do after that? You start thinking. You start managing your life. You rest on your laurels. You stop realizing that without God, you'll go crazy again. The craziness will start again. You'll slip backwards. Next thing you know, you got 20 years and you're drinking. Next thing you're like my friend Jack. You go out in the parking lot of the call room and you got 35 years and you put a revolver in your mouth and you blow your brains out. You do stuff like that. Or you start taking Quaaludes to feel better. Or you start LSD or whatever the heck it is. And you start doing insane stuff again with double-digit sobriety. So that's all I have to say about insanity. So thank you very much.